Welcome back, folks. This is RJ Sudha again, host and founder of Tamizh Suvai Radio, with another extremely inspiring person, Harini Krishnan. Harini Krishnan, as you all know, she has been on our show several times. Very inspiring person. She has been till recently the Democratic Party organizer, not just an average Democratic Party organizer, but I mean the person to go to person. I would say she was one of the most inspiring. She was one of the key Democratic Party organizer. She was one of the pivotal person who was responsible for having the Biden-Harris team win, I should say. And she was also recently awarded the 2020 Town of Hillsborough Citizen of the Year award. And she's a Joe Biden delegate of the Democratic National Convention. She's also a member of finance team, AAPIs, of for Biden and women for Biden at Joe Biden 2020. And she's also the board member at FunHer. And as a professional, she's had a bachelor's of political science from UC Irvine and a master's at public administration. Wow, from USC. That's a lot of accomplishments, and I see from your Facebook profile that you have a lot more. I had to pick and choose a few that just stood out. Fantastic accomplishment, Harini, and welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and hey, listen, you are one of my SHeros.
Thank you so much.
So it is a pleasure to be here. The way you use your voice and your platform to elevate so many issues, right, is very admirable. I remember that I was so grateful, especially during the general election and also the Georgia election, the way you allowed me to come onto your show and encourage people to vote, encourage people to go to the polls, to become involved. And I really appreciated that, because I think as organizers, we can only carry our message so far, and we rely on partners and allies like you to spread that message forward. So thank you.
That's the least I can do, right? That's the least I can do as a radio host. And when you go out in person, knocking on the doors and encouraging people to vote, I can only use you as a platform to propagate that message and help you to help the people to vote and bring back sanity to the country. And for that, I have to thank you, and I have to thank God Almighty for providing me this platform and help bring back, I should say, the sanity in this country. So welcome again, Harini. And I was going to ask you about besides what LinkedIn or Facebook has given me a profile of yourself. Could you describe yourself, your personal and public life, to the listeners of this interview?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of people ask me, what do you do? Yes. It's a very common question, right?
You seem to be busy all the time, always say, you give me an interview time and then say, Sudha, no, I'm busy at this time. And then you send out this Facebook post. Oh, I just got off this post with Kamala. Oh, Biden was there at me. Oh my God, what is she up to? You're always busy. Tell me, what do you do?
So that's a question I get asked a lot. And I think it's very characteristic of 21st century women that we don't wear one hat, we wear multiple hats in multiple fields and in multiple realms. So that's one thing that I want to put out there, that I think, my husband has a PhD in computer science parallel processing, but I think women are the ultimate parallel processors because we're able to, right? We're able to handle multiple threads at one time. We're able to handle our families, our children, we're able to, our elders, we're able to handle our professional goals, and also have an active voice, whether it is public service, a civic engagement. So, that is representative, I would say, of every woman, regardless of what generation you belong to, of the 21st century. With respect to my personal and professional life, I think I'm a product of my socialization and my experiences. And for that, I'm very grateful to my parents. I was born in India. And because of my father's job, I was raised in Europe. I spent my elementary school in Paris, attending a diplomatic school. I spent my middle school at a Catholic convent in London.
Interesting. Okay.
And then I came to the US when I was 13 years old, to a town called Fullerton. And I went to high school there, and then went to UCI. My initial path was to, I was so moved by my experiences traveling from continent to continent, that I wanted to know more about international organizations. So after my bachelor's in political science, I jumped right into a master's in public administration with an emphasis on international organizations. So as part of that, I started my career, you could say, working for UNICEF in India country office in their community development section. And I saw firsthand, I saw both the huge bureaucracy that is the UN, right? And at the same time, I was discouraged because a lot of money was pumped into a lot of conferences and, Yeah, and whereas there were all these grassroots groups, throughout, I was stationed in Delhi, throughout Delhi, that did the work with very limited means. For example, there was this group called Butterflies that provided non-formal education to kids who worked full time. Who would, whether it was picking, picking recycled materials, or working in the carpet industry, right? I mean, you're talking about child labor,
Sure.
And I kind of viewed it this way, like UNICEF put out all these proclamations and issued these statements, that every child deserves the right to education and no child should have to work, right? Whereas Butterflies recognized that, you don't bring about that change, especially if that kid is contributing to the income of a single parent, where the mother has an alcoholic husband, right? And she is struggling, she's working 3 jobs, right? And a child is contributing to that income. You don't go to that mother and say, no, you know what? You put this kid in school without offering some incentives. So what Butterflies did was provided a non-formal school for them, from like 4 to 8 p.m. at night, provided free medical care, gave them meals, not only the kids, but also the families.
Wow.
So there was incentives for the kids to actually attend school, right?
Nice.
And so, that kind of creative thinking out of the box, that was my first experience into grassroots organizing and into, grassroots groups that thought out of the box. And then after that, I came back to
you actually went out of your comfort zone. You lived in a good place in Europe and you came to the US and studied your master's and all that. And then you went out and saw the reality of India and how the people are struggling and how child labor was put into force and why the child labor was put into force. And you made changes, your organization made changes in their lives. And that gave you a lot of satisfaction. And that was a calling for you. Right?
It was a big calling for me because I when you work for the UN, there's a whole level of prestige associated with it, right? I mean, think about it, right? For an average parent of Indian origin, right? I mean, for every parent, I would say, if you say your child works for the UN or UNICEF, it's a source of pride because it's an internationally recognized organization. And yet, when I saw the work of these grassroots groups that really impacted the lives of these children in very meaningful ways, not just the children, but the families themselves, giving them a path forward, right? That I took those lessons and I came back to the US, and then I continued working for nonprofit groups. I worked for a group called International Medical Corps that sent that provided, emergency medical relief in war-ravaged countries. Instead of providing Band-Aid solutions, they would go and train the local medics there, right? In places like Angola and Rwanda and Bosnia. And then I also worked for an international environmental human rights group that looked at the impact that huge hydroelectric projects had on the most affected populations who were forcibly removed without any compensation, right? So I worked for these groups, and then I got pregnant with my first child.
So did you have to geographically move into such areas, or did you have to just work out of the US office and coordinate the work?
So I worked out of the US office, but I did have the opportunity to travel a couple of times.
Okay.
But I made the conscious decision, because at that time, so I'm married to somebody who is an innovator at heart. He's now in his, I don't even know, I think third or fourth startup. And he cherishes that startup life, the creativity, the anxiety that it brings. And so, but when you run a startup, your life is consumed by that, right? So I had to make the decision of, there has to be at least one parent that has to, I think if we had more flexible,
the balance in the life, balance.
Yeah, and I oftentimes wrestle with this. I think if we had more flexible work environments, I would have continued working. But it was a decision I made by myself, and so I left my job, and I had my two children. I had Janani, and then I had Abea exactly 2 years later, and then I briefly went back to work when they were very little, when they hadn't started school yet, on a part-time basis.
Very nice.
And I worked for an organization called Child Family Health International that was based actually in San Francisco, and did an incredible amount of work in providing healthcare to the most underserved areas in the world. For example, one of my favorite experiences is taking my children. Janani was 6 years old, Abea was 4 years old, trekking them with me to India, to a village outside in the outskirts of Dehradun called Tangaon. This community health clinic that we helped fund, that essentially provided medical care for 300 people living in the area and adjacent villages that wouldn't have had healthcare access, because they would have had to travel to Dehradun, which was miles and miles away. And so I remember taking my children there to this community health clinic, which was basically a set of 3 huts, 3 large huts. And I remember I wanted to take my children, I wanted to take them to see the work that I did.
Young also, but at least you get them there's an early impression that they can have at what reality is in India, as well as how people, how not just India, but how far are medical camps from the real medical hospitals from the common people, right? And then about the medical camps themselves.
No, and I think it impacted them in many ways. I think, first of all, they saw that they too have the power to impact change, right? That one person can impact change, number one. Number two, my favorite memory is Janani and Abea sitting in a group with the children of the patients that came to that clinic, and they had no toys, but there were all these sticks that were, lying around. So they played with sticks, they made little houses with sticks. The kids there showed them how to make houses and little stick people. And, they came up with this elaborate story. They spoke only English. right? And the kids, only spoke Hindi, their dialects of Hindi, and yet they managed to communicate and they managed to build this imaginary world for themselves. And I think it had such a deep impact on them that after they came back, my kids were never, my kids were never the kids that said, we have to go to Toys R Us and get these toys or get this or get that. And I think even more so after that trip, I remember they only pushed me to go to the library. We went to the library 4 or 5 times a week, and we would spend 2-3 hours, every day after school there. We just sit there, and they went into those books and their imaginary worlds, spurring their creativity. But I think especially after this, they saw how kids across the world make do with the most limited of resources, but yet using their creativity and their imagination, how happy they were.
And still can be happy.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think it really impacted them in such a strong way that, after they came back, especially, I remember every birthday I would ask them, what do you want? And it would never be anything material. It would never be, I want a My Little Pony, or I want this, right? I just want to spend time with you. That was the answer. Or I want to spend time with Tata Pati, their grandparents or their cousins. So it was always an experience. So that was something very meaningful to me. But then I continued doing that until it got to a point where it was very difficult because my work was in San Francisco. I would have to leave there at 2:30 in order to beat traffic and get to them to pick them up.
Okay.
Right. And when I would get inevitably late and I would see how it impacted them, I decided to step back.
Sure.
And, and I would have loved to continue that work, but, I wanted to make sure that I was there for them, that I was the one taking them to the, after school activities, and that I was there and I was attentive. And so I left CFHI and I began volunteering in the schools.
Okay.
And then when I volunteered in the schools, I realized that, that was something that I was passionate about. Hillsborough schools are some of the best schools in the country,
really? Okay.
right? But I also saw that, I could have a voice as a woman of color, right? As an Indian American woman, as a South Asian woman, that I could, I could have an impact, in the school. So I started volunteering more and more. I became the first South Asian woman to become the parent group president of West Hillsborough Elementary School.
Excellent.
And then when they moved to middle school in Hillsborough, I became Crocker parent group president, and again was the first South Asian woman to be in that role. I joined the Hillsborough Schools Foundation, and my impact, I would say, the thing that I wanted to bring was I wanted to bring a greater multicultural awareness to these schools, right? So that, kids, who were different could see themselves. Right. And so I started doing these Indian culture and music assemblies, both in West School as well as Crocker School. And I would go and, every semester they would bring me on. I would do a whole day to all the classes. I would stay the whole day, and I would do a whole day of classes where I would, demonstrate where, tell them a little bit about, India, the food, the music. And then I would tell them about Indian classical music. It's what differentiated it. What are some of the commonalities in Western music, right? Things like, solfa syllables, swarams, talam, rhythm, and, compare and contrast in a way that was relatable to them. Right. Can you hold on 1 second? I'm going to move to the kitchen just for 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, is it okay if I turn off the video for 1 second?
Yes.
Okay, okay. Okay, perfect. Sorry.
No problem.
Just accommodating family. Yeah, so they, started doing these assemblies, and because I think, when for a lot of Americans, when they think of India, they think of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, or they think of Bollywood, right? Those are their only reference points. And I wanted them to understand, right, what being an Indian American means, right? And so after that happened, a lot of other parents of different cultures started doing the same.
Beautiful.
Right.
Very nice.
They had a Chinese American assembly. They had assemblies of other cultures, and it became right. And then we had these multicultural days, and that became a tradition. And that was one aspect. The other aspect was I really pushed for, kids to have better civic education.
Okay.
And so one of the things that I'm very proud of is I worked with a whole bunch of parents to organize the first 8th grade field trip to DC.
Wow.
And that took a lot. It took a lot of
That's
negotiating
a lot of
and a
planning.
lot.
Okay.
It's a lot of planning and a lot of, right? And there's a lot of factors that go into it.
Absolutely.
It was presenting to the board, right? The school board, and convincing them that this is something viable that we can replicate year after year with truly meaningful impact and consequences. And so that happened. And so now every year Crocker goes to Washington, DC.
Okay.
So that happened. I continued on the board of Hillsborough Schools Foundation. And then after that, 2016 happened. 2016, when 2016 happened and Hillary Clinton ran, I would attend her fundraisers. I would help. I would attend a phone bank here and there, right? I would organize here and there, but it wasn't continuous. Oh, backtracking a little bit, before 2016, sorry, after Hillsborough Schools Foundation, my older daughter decided that she wanted to, she was looking at high schools. There's no high school in Hillsborough. Okay. And we gave her the option to go anywhere. And she said, I want to go to a public school. Okay. And she said, because she wanted diversity, she wanted greater diversity. And she wanted a large school where she could, a large school meant more resources and more support for basically, starting any club, any interest that, she wanted to expound, she could, right? And so she started attending San Mateo High School. Okay. And when she did, even before she started, when the San Mateo High School Educational Foundation found out that my daughter was considering attending San Mateo High School, they recruited me. So I joined their board as a vice president the first year that my daughter started attending the high school. And then I became the president the next year, and I was president for 5 years.
Beautiful, very nice.
And the thing that most interesting about San Mateo High School was that it was the largest public school in the district, and where nearly 40% of the kids were from the reduced and free lunch program, participated in the reduced and free lunch program. Huge Latino population, huge Pacific American population.
What percentage is it?
Almost 40%.
40%.
Right. And because of that, it had such a negative, a negative rap, people, I remember people would refer to it as Samageddon, right? And I found that, really, disappointing. So, I as part of the Educational Foundation, we looked at the barriers to access to education. Why weren't kids graduating? What is it that impeded their access, right? It's an issue of equity. Looking at why weren't kids taking these upper division classes, taking AP classes, right? And so we addressed it directly. For example, we funded, opening the library for an hour before school started. We funded keeping the library open for 2 hours after school finished. We opened up a computer center. We gave them free access to Wi-Fi and computers so that kids could finish their assignments at the library, because a lot of things we take for granted. One of the things is having Wi-Fi, having internet, but that's not the case.
Not available at home. Yeah.
That's not available at home. And second of all, we found out that in a lot of families, the parents would leave work. They would work 3 jobs. So they would leave work at 6 a.m. in the morning. So they would drop their kids outside the schools at 6 a.m.
Oh my God.
And school doesn't start until 8 a.m. So these kids are sitting there, right? So if we opened the library, gave them a place, staffed it, gave them a place where they had access to computers, access to, a quiet environment where they could study, they could take, right? So we did that. We also were the first district to check out Chromebooks to these students, just like you would check out textbooks. Right. We fundraised for it in our annual fundraiser through Fund a Need. And we were the first pilot project, I would say, in the Bay Area to do that. And a lot of other schools followed suit.
Hats off.
Right. And the best part about this is we increased the graduation rate phenomenally to close to 90%. And most importantly, in 2016, Newsweek magazine recognized San Mateo High School in the top 250 high schools in the country, from never being ranked before.
It was never documented, and now you're recognizing it. Oh my!
Right. Goodness. So that was a huge, eye opener for me in terms of when you've removed barriers to access to education, right? Then, that's how what is the pathway for addressing equity?
I was actually going to talk about a pathway. Open up all these alternatives. You have an early access to library, early access to give the handoff Chromebooks, etc. Now that's going to be continuing for the next batch of kids. And there is no stopping after that. It's just going to continue on. Wonderful.
No, absolutely. Right. And it's, that's something that I will say that I'm incredibly proud of. So that, I continue to work with San Mateo High School. And then 2016 happened. And when Hillary lost, and with the realization that we now had the xenophobic president who hated people who look like me and you, who demonized minorities and who demonized immigrants, who demonized, people from underserved communities, I decided, okay, I have to, this is a realm I want to jump in. So with the blessings of a mentor, I jumped in. I ran to be a delegate for the California Democratic Party, not knowing anything about the party mechanism. I won with the highest votes in the district, thanks to a global village of family and friends. And then I started joining various political networks to learn about advocacy, learn about engagement. I joined Fund Her PAC, which is a PAC started by one of my closest friends, a personal SHero of mine, to help elect progressive women to state legislatures nationwide. One of the things we saw was that Republicans had gerrymandered, especially after the 2010 census, districts in such a destructive way that it's so that they'd done it to their advantage, right? At the expense of communities of color. not having a voice in government. So because of that, joined Fund Her PAC. And through Fund Her, we helped raise the number of women in state legislature, even in California, the most progressive state in the country. We only 21% of women of the state legislature is women. And in a matter of 2 years, we managed to increase that percentage from 21% to 32%.
Oh.
And now our goal is to push it all the way to 50%, right? So,
perfect, yeah.
And we backed women all over the state. We won a lot of the races, and then we replicated that success. We backed women in Virginia state legislature, knowing that if they flipped blue, they could help ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, right? Because they were the last state that was needed to ratify in order for it to go forward. Yes. We did. We backed leaders like Senator Ghazala Hashmi, who's originally has roots to Hyderabad, right? And she won, and she is now a leader in the Virginia state legislature. We backed women in Minnesota, in Iowa. And now we are expanding. We are looking at state legislatures around the country that are flippable, especially, and making sure that we elect women.
And it looks very promising, I should say. That looks very, very promising.
Right? Especially after Georgia. Look at Georgia, right?
Georgia is a perfect example. Yeah.
Right. So, and when you back women, you are backing leaders who are going to push for family leave, who are going to push for pay equity, who are going to push for, children's, for education. We're going to push for, maternal health issues. Not that men won't, right? But for women, it is much more. We have experienced all those barriers.
Only because we have experience, we'll be able to speak out on our own behalf, on our experiences. We'll be able to convince upper management. Yeah, I agree.
Exactly, right? And you also prioritize it over other legislation. Absolutely. Right. So that was one thing. And then I became more active in the party. I was appointed to the platform committee, and that happened. And then I started thinking about the presidential election.
Sure.
And I started thinking about having a real impact, electing a woman to the highest office. So after doing my own research, I followed Vice President Kamala Harris for a long time. I've been a fan of her from when she ran to be the Attorney General, to the Senate, but never could contribute in a meaningful way as an organizer because of my own limitations, right? So I decided, okay, and by that time I was an empty nester. 2018, my youngest child, I have 2 daughters. My younger daughter went to college. So I said, okay, this is the time for me to invest all my energy and time into helping to elect a woman. And that's a regret I've always had, that I didn't do enough to help elect Hillary Clinton. Right. And so I never wanted to wake up and have that feeling that I didn't do enough. The way I felt on November 4th, 2016, I never wanted to feel this way. And knowing the threat of having a president, every day that he is president, he's enacting some new horrendous law, whether it's Muslim ban, or whether it is freezing all green cards, which affects Indian Americans and API communities the most, right? Or whether it's the number of hate crimes that have increased under his administration. So I decided, I jumped all in. To support Vice President Kamala Harris. I became a lead volunteer organizer for her in California. I helped train organizers. The campaign had something called Kamala Organizing Academy.
I know that. Okay.
Yeah, and I helped train organizers. So that they had the skills necessary to go create their own regional groups and inspire more volunteers to join. And so that was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I got to know the vice president really well. I got to meet many members of her family really well. I traveled with the vice president to many places. One of my most favorite experiences was going to Des Moines, Iowa, for the Liberty and Justice Dinner, where she gave one of the most phenomenal speeches, traveling with a whole bunch of us from California, and then canvassing with our second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, in Iowa.
You mentioned it yesterday in one of your posts about chatting with him, right?
Yeah, so he was, he's a phenomenal person. I would say not a partner, spouse, person, human being, just an incredible, role model, I would say, because, I still remember, the first time I watched the movie RBG, and then RBG gave an interview, she talked about the importance of her partner in her achieving whatever she could, right? It is so critical, right? When behind every strong, they always say this, right? Behind every strong man is a woman. Behind every strong woman are very important allies, including a strong partner, right? Who not only will, support the partner, but also lift them up. And I think when I look at our second gentleman, he's a role model for men around this country, and teaching them how to be allies to women, and in how to elevate women to achieve their greatest potential, because that's something I've always thought about. So I got to canvass with him. I got to canvass with a number of very close, number of supporters who've become very close friends of mine. I call them Kamala's, they're my family, right? Kamala supporters family. And so had great experiences, traveled to Nevada to canvass there. And then in December, when she suspended her campaign, I was completely crushed and heartbroken. And it took me a while. It took me a few weeks to kind of gather myself. And what I admire the most about our vice president is not only her grit and resilience, but also her grace. After she suspended her campaign, she could have just kind of gone into a shell. She immediately traveled around the country to meet her supporters. For a week, she went to every state to meet her supporters and thank them for joining her campaign.
Oh, really? I didn't know
she
that.
did.
Oh, wow.
She did. And we're talking about not only donors, we're talking about volunteers. We're talking about canvassers. We're talking about anybody who was part of her campaign.
I don't recall anybody doing that. A person who was withdrawn from the campaign to have gone around and thanked. Amazing. Hats off.
No, and she also explained to us, so I was on a call the day that she suspended her campaign. She called some of us, and in that call, she said that, she had enough cash to go until Iowa.
Okay.
But then that would have meant that if Iowa hadn't panned out, then she would much rather pay her staff, until through the holidays, through January, right? So that they didn't have to, look for a job, right?
I mean,
rather than
that is a true class act. That is class act.
And that's something that people don't write about. But that's a true leader to me, right? Absolutely. Somebody who cared enough about, making sure that her staff didn't have to scramble to find a job through the holidays, right? That was the real reason. And that she traveled everywhere to talk to her staff. And she came to California, and she met us at the home of our Lieutenant Governor, Eleni Kounalakis. And she talked to every one of us who's been a supporter since day one. It was a 2-hour event. She had remarks for 30 minutes, but after that, she made time. I talked to her. She heard me cry. And I remember she held my hands and she said, democracy is a movement, not a moment. You need to keep fighting. She said, this fight is not over. You need to jump back in. The fight's not over. I remember those words. So I took those words and a friend of mine who was on Kamala's finance committee invited me to meet Dr. Jill Biden at an event that he was a co-host for. So I said, okay. So I went in February. I went and I met Dr. Jill Biden and I heard her speak. And I heard her speak about her husband with so much respect and empathy. She talked about the loss he has suffered and, about how his faith gave him purpose. Not only his faith in terms of, him being a Christian, but his faith in people, his faith in our shared humanity. And that to me was life-changing. Yeah. So I decided I jumped full back in again. I started a NorCal Joyful Warriors for Joe and Kamala, local Bay Area grassroots group. We started phone banking. We were all Kamala organizers who were now supporting Biden. We jumped back in. We started doing weekly phone banks. We started doing postcards, right? We did the whole thing. And then I came across this group called South Asians for Biden, and I got a call, and I spoke to this incredible person who's now a friend of mine. His name is Zain Ahmed, and invited me to join the California chapter and said, do you want to be a co-California director? I said, sure. And that's my journey. Okay. So I started, joined the South Asians for Biden. And the truly transformative part was talking to the national director, Neha Divan. So Neha was the former chair of South Asians for Hillary. And talking about a SHero, right? Talking about a phenomenal SHero. She inspired me.
Yeah.
After having that conversation, I'm inspired by strong women. I decided, okay, I'm going to jumped in, started building a chapter in California, but at the same time, started helping Neha with grassroots organizing. Okay. And so I started helping to co-lead the grassroots organizing efforts, organizing phone banks in key battleground states. Okay. We had phone banks every week to Wisconsin, to North Carolina, Michigan, Pennsylvania, right? And we called South Asian voters there. We were South Asians calling South Asian voters, and we saw the response that we got, right? Because when you say, hey, my name is Harini Krishnan, and you're calling another Krishnan, or you're calling a Sharma, or you're calling, people stand up and they're like, right? Immediately they're curious. They're like, oh, you're calling me. Why are you so involved in this election, right? And you tell them why. And they actually listen. It's no longer a spam or a robocall to them. Right. It's something meaningful. Yeah. And then started doing those. And I will say that we were the margin of victory, mobilizing the AAPI community.
So proud of the impact that our community has had in this election. So proud.
No.
And so proud of the work that you and your team have done. Fantastic. So proud.
No, and I'm telling you, it was being part of this family of organizers. We invested 18 hours a day. We slept maybe 5-6 hours, 18 hours a day. I remember, especially 4 weeks before the election. This is all we did. We lived and breathed. We were either texting people or calling people. And then right before the election, I decided, okay, I know it's COVID, but this election is historic.
Yes.
And it's going to come down to
You took
Pennsylvania.
chance. You took a big chance there. Yeah.
I did. And even my own family, they were very apprehensive. My parents, Appa, Amma, were like, Hari, you're traveling on a plane for 6 hours. COVID is rampant. I know your heart is in this, but we worry. But I told them, listen, I'll wear a face shield. I'll wear a bio romper. I'll wear whatever it is. I'll take precautions. I want to be there for a long time, for my children's sake, right? So I will make sure. And so I went to Philly. I canvassed on the ground there, knowing that Pennsylvania, it was going to come down to Pennsylvania, and it did.
Absolutely.
It did. And we turned out the vote. Going door to door.
And I remember your post, guys, hang in there. We are going to turn it around. We are going to turn it around. I was holding my breath, and we did turn it around. Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing, right? The other part of it was we always knew. Yeah. We always knew that election day results favor Republicans, but the early voting results favor Democrats. But the early voting results won't be disclosed for days after the election. And that we would be in for the fight of our lives, right? With Trump calling election fraud, which he did. But despite that, right? But we always knew. And so it was also kind of quieting this anxiety, this collective anxiety that the whole world felt, right? It was, being this voice of calm and saying, listen, have faith in our organizing, right? Have faith in the work that you did, that we're going to win. And on November 7th, seeing people wake up, dancing in the streets, Philadelphia was dancing. They came out, they were dancing in the streets with masks on, somebody is beating a drum, people are dancing. That pure joy, right? That pure joy was just unparalleled. But then we also knew that this was not the end, because if Biden Harris have to, in order for them to be successful and to pursue the ambitious goals that they had, we needed to have a majority in the Senate. And for that, we needed to win those 2 seats in Georgia. Yes. So I took 3 days off and jumped right back in.
Okay.
And we're the first South Asian organization to launch phone banks.
Oh my God.
We launched phone banks, weekly phone banks. We did postcards. At one point, this house was so full of postcards that there were rooms that were blocked off to my family. They could not go to the family room. They could not go into the guest room because it was just full of postcards, me dividing it to send to people everywhere. But it was worthwhile. We sent out 45,000 postcards to Georgia voters. We made 25,000 calls. And the AAPI community came out in force. In Georgia, we won. And look, today is a historic day. Just a couple of hours ago, the Senate passed one of the most historic pieces of legislation, unprecedented, history-making, $1.9 trillion in COVID relief for working and middle-class families, relief for small businesses, relief for hospitals, relief for schools so that our schools can reopen safely, relief for struggling families. This bill will cut child poverty in half. And how did this happen? This happened because people around this country organized like never before to help not only elect Biden Harris, but also John Ossoff and Reverend Warnock.
Absolutely. So that's no doubt about it. Yeah.
So that's kind of an encapsulation of the only other aspect of this, I would say, that people don't know often about is that I have, I'm an Indian classical vocalist. I am the daughter, of Thiruvaiyar Srinivasa Raghava Krishnan, probably the foremost exponent of Sankirtanam and Abhang Sangeet. you know, in the world, I would say. And somebody who is dedicated to his entire life to uplifting people spiritually. So, and from a very young age, I've performed with my sisters, Shubha Priya and Priya, as first, you know, we were called the California Sisters so that we could release, so that we could sell more albums.
Really? Have you been singing lately?
No, ever since, you know, in fact, my sister's on my case, and I'll put a plug for this. So my sister was one of the founding members of Lotus, you know, the music organization.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Right. And one of the founding members of Lotus, which gives a platform for Indian classical artists to perform in the Bay Area, right?
Yes.
And so they are celebrating their 21st anniversary with the Tyagaraja Aradhane, right? So in fact, she's been telling me, you have to participate, and I have to send my video in, but it's been a while. My singing took a back burner when my political organizing.
I'm sure it'll come back. So
so I'm looking forward to that. So that's a hat I wear that I'm very proud of. You know, I have performed with my sisters. It's California Sisters and Krishnan Sisters, and I've sung on my own. I've also composed music and choreographed music for dance productions, specifically with Srilata Suresh's Vishwashanti Dance Academy for their thematic dance productions. I missed that. I've sung for Arangetrams, you know, with incredible powerhouses like, you know, Shanti Mani, I call her Shanti Narayan, and Narayanana, the Mridangam maestro. And, you know, I have so much respect for incredible, you know, artists that I have been very fortunate to be part of, you know, people like, you know, Ravindra Bharati Sridharan and, you know, Ramesh Srinivasan, you know, and Natarajan Srinivasan, all very, very good friends of mine. You know, Shrikant Chari, a very good friend of mine, right? So my music fraternity, I missed that, but, you know, but I felt that I had to use my organizing skills to really impact change. So that my music kind of took a, you know, but I still, you know, I still do, you know, some things from time to time. For example, I do a guest lecture series at San Jose State University with a friend of mine who teaches music theory. And so I do a guest lecture on improvisation in Indian classical music and how it can be adapted to jazz. So I'm continuing to do that. I continue to present at music conferences. I continue to be a judge. In fact, right now, I'm a judge for Desi Acapella for All American Avaz, the South Asian Acapella circuit. They just finished 2 competitions. Mehfil, I was a judge for Mehfil, and then they had and Gate Raho. So yeah, I continue to be, I will be a judge all the way up until nationals in May. I'm looking, I enjoyed that. So I, you know, I that's my life in.
Nice. Oh, that's a handful, I should say. That's a lot of things on your hand. I had a few rapid fire questions for you, Harini. What does women empowerment mean to you? Just a rapid fire question.
You know, it's so funny that you said women empowerment. I'm going to quote the niece of our Vice President, Mina Harris, who recently released a statement. She, you know, of her support for this campaign called Powered by Her. You know, women's empowerment is in itself a word that needs to be changed, because we don't need to ask anybody's permission to own our power, right? Because women's empowerment somehow gives the connotation that that someone else needs to give us power, right? We don't need to ask, right? We don't need to ask for anybody's permission to own our power. I think as women, we all we just need to own our power. Our power is limitless. Our power is infinite. We just need to look at the barriers, the systemic barriers that exist, both in our professional and personal lives, that impede us from owning our power. So that's my response.
Well said, very well said. Two women who have impacted or inspired you all your life.
Can I make it 4?
Go for it.
I would say, so my mother.
Okay.
My mother is my rock. She is my North Star. She's my sounding board. She is probably the most fearless and courageous woman I've ever met in my life. You know, when looking at my mom is a 74-year-old, 5 foot, really cute woman with a sari, reading behind her glasses, but what people don't know is that she is one of the first South Indian women to climb the 3rd tallest mountain in the world. She climbed Peak Kanchenjunga as a teenager, and at a time when women didn't even go to college. She was in Chennai. She was part of NCC Cadet Corps, and she climbed Kanchenjunga with Tenzing Norgay, who was the Sherpa who climbed Mount Everest with Sir Edmund Hillary, right? And she won a silver pickaxe, a Medal of Honor from the chief of the Indian Armed Forces. And there's a movie made about her called Malay Area Mangai, the woman who climbed the mountain.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And
number 2.
So
fantastic. Please, send her the highest level of salute to her. Okay.
I absolutely will. Right. And so, she is one of the strongest women. She is the voice inside my head. Whenever I doubt myself, she's the one who says, yes, you can. Yes, you can. Right. So I would say that my mom, Amma Annapurna Krishnan. Okay. The second woman that I would say is Congresswoman Jackie Speer. She is my local congresswoman.
Okay.
I was one of my personal SHeros. Not everyone might know this about her, but she's a Jonestown massacre survivor. She was shot when she accompanied, Congressman Ryan to seek relief for some of her constituents who were part of the Jonestown, compound. She came back from that and is one of the fiercest advocates for women in Congress today. She's been a mentor to me and my daughter, Janani. In fact, the reason why Janani decided to go, wanted to go into public service. My daughter recently graduated from Harvard and will be part of the Harvard Law School class of 2025, wanting to pursue constitutional public interest law. It's because of Congresswoman Jackie Speer. And so she is a SHero to me. The 2 other SHeros, of course, I've already talked about her. Our Vice President Kamala Harris, as somebody who has broken barriers all her life. People have told her, this is not your time, wait your turn. And she has always said, I'm not going to ask anyone's permission to lead, I'm just going to lead. Okay. And so she is somebody that I look up to, somebody who's broken barriers, somebody who's been the first. And she's always said, I may be the first, but I will not be the last. Somebody who believes in lifting up other women.
Yeah, she's always said that. Yeah.
And the last person for me is RBG. The late RBG, who really showed us what a fierce SHero should be. Somebody who never gave up this fight for equal rights, and somebody who really fought for every woman in this country, to the place that we are today. We have a long way to go, but even the fact that we have our first female vice president isn't a huge part thanks to the efforts of RBG. So those are the women that I look up to.
Very nice. Thank you for your nice answer. Your message for young girls young girls of color in this country, or maybe all over the world, who are aspiring for big dreams, have big dreams in life. What is your message to them?
The same message that that our vice president tells every young woman: don't ask for permission to lead. Just lead. And the other thing that I would say is for young girls, I would say that, be fearless, be bold. Don't be afraid to be bold. And don't ever doubt what you're capable of. I kind of imagine, my Ishta Devatam is Hanuman, right? And my father always says Hanuman never knew his potential, right? He was that divine essence that never knew his potential. And so I feel like as women, our potential is limitless. And our power is limitless. We just have to work at it to own it.
Wow, fantastic. Great interview, great chatting with you. Very inspiring talking to you, Harini. You had extremely colorful public and private lives surrounding you. You've been an inspiration to so many women, so many young girls. You played a very big role in shaping the democracy of this country, I should say, shaping your own community, shaping the school districts you've lived in, shaping your own family, your own daughters, and of course, you've been an inspiration to all the next generation of girls. Thank you so much for being a part of my radio show, being a part of this community also. God bless, and have a good International Women's Day. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And thank you. You are somebody that I'm fortunate to call a friend and a mentor. And I'm so grateful for the work that you do to lift up women and elevate women. We need more women like you. So grateful for you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Harini. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
Yeah.